Commissioners' regular board meeting, Thursday, February 25th, 2016. Time is 5:01. Jackie, would you call the roll, please?
President Riley?
Here.
Vice President Janner?
Here.
Commissioner Egan absent. Commissioner Ensign absent. Commissioner Heidi Carr? Commissioner Todd?
Here.
Commissioner Young? Here.
Yeah, and Commissioner Heidi went to get some equipment, and Commissioner Ensign notified me that he is on his way, so we should be good. And Commissioner Egan is out of town, so we.
And I always add the time if someone comes in, so.
Okay. Do we have anyone from the public signed up to speak?
No.
No. Okay, then we have move into new business. We have the recreation programming plan.
Move to adopt the updated recreation programming plan dated February 25, 2016.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion?
I actually do have a comment. The substance of it is absolutely fine. I found the organization of it a little troubling, because I felt like it was a little circular with the core values and mission and all that sort of thing. So my only suggestion for it is we're going into this whole CAPRA thing, and looking at all these plans and all of that sort of thing. You may be able to put Naperville at a glance and demographic overview and our mission, values and stuff kind of as an appendix. You know, and then you can like refer to it again and you don't have to restate it. Because I felt like you have mission goals and objectives, which is the Park District's mission goals, and then the objectives of the plan. You have that at 17, when really, to me, that's sort of like, we have to start with that. Now, maybe you start with our Naperville at a glance, and then you go to our mission, but I just sort of felt like, I just sort of struggled. So I would just take a look at it, because you might be able to come up with like an appendix or a first 2 pages that you can use as a template over and over.
Okay.
And look at that, just a sign for the vote.
Commissioner Heidi, we have a motion on the floor to adopt the updated recreation programming plan dated February 25th, 2016. It was seconded. We're now having a discussion. Kirsten had some comments for improvement. Any comments from you on it? There's no further discussion. Jackie, call the roll, please.
Sure. Vice President Janner?
Yes.
Commissioner Todd?
Yes.
Commissioner Egan absent. Commissioner Ensign absent. Commissioner Heidi?
Yes.
Commissioner Young?
Yes.
President Riley?
Yes. Next, we have minutes.
Move to approve the regular meeting minutes from February 11, 2016.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion?
Jen, did you catch the Scrivener errors in the committee assignments? Okay, yeah, there.
Those changes.
They're obvious.
We don't normally have an award every meeting for the one who read the packet most thoroughly, but I think we should institute one.
Sorry.
Jackie, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Vice President Janner?
Yes.
Commissioner Todd?
Yes.
Commissioner Egan absent. Commissioner Ensign absent. Commissioner Heidi?
Yes.
Commissioner Young?
Yes.
President Riley?
Yes. Next, we have item C, discussion items. Before we get into the ones that are listed here, just one thing I want to bring out for, see if we can reach consensus on among the commissioners. When we started a couple of years ago with the process that we have of, you know, we have committees with all of our goals, and that's where the ideas kind of start. So they go into committee, then they come forward at the second meeting of the month, which, since Dirk is here, if Dirk is not here, we can actually refer to as a workshop, and then it comes to the first meeting of the month for the vote. When we first started down that path, the workshops were running quite long, and they were easily running 3 hours plus. So we decided to start those meetings at 6 o'clock rather than 7, so we weren't keeping staff into an extremely long day. Plus, you know, commissioners' better ideas were earlier in the evening. Now that that process has evolved, it seems that the workshops now are running a little bit tighter. So we're not running into 3-hour meetings as much as typically are in the hour-and-a-half-ish range. So the other thing Jackie and I took a look at was, we've had a couple of times where, because of work schedules, people are literally just walking in the door at 6 o'clock. So, or perhaps at exactly 5 after, I know, exactly 5 after. So the thought was, how about if we push the start of the workshops back to 6:30? That way it doesn't make the staff stay, terribly much longer, yet at the same time it allow a little more flexibility for commissioners. Thought?
By workshop, you mean a non-televised regular meeting?
Yes.
Our second Thursday meeting of the month, yes, that's correct.
Untelevised but taped. They will now be videotaped.
Yes. So does that seem like a worthwhile idea?
I'll make this at 6. I don't know.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, so, we'll try for a couple of months. If it works, great. If not, we can always.
Would you like to start that next month?
Sure.
And I will send out an appointment, a reoccurring appointment for that
Yeah.
meeting to start at 6:30.
You have to make another, you declare our meetings at the beginning of.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna have to we'll do a press
We'll do a
release.
press release, we'll
And then-
change it on the website.
But I think I'm gonna have to do to my people that I notice meetings to, because I did that at the beginning of the
Yeah.
year, and I'll just change all the times. That's a really good point, thank you.
Is it a resolution that we have?
Yes. Yeah, I would go ahead and do a resolution, just do another resolution to change the second meeting of the month to 6:30.
Just to be covered.
Okay.
Okay.
So you think that would be better for staff?
Yes.
Well, I think it'd be okay for staff. I talked to Ray about it. It's really, it is more for the commissioners, because there's just been times when, being here right at 6 is a little bit tough, and it seems like 10, 15 minutes leap away might make it easier. And hopefully for staff, we'll still get through it at a reasonably early time.
It's kind of a compromise time between 6 and 7.
Bingo, there you go.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so discussion items. First, we have our 3-year financial plan, 2016-2018 presentation.
Great, thank you. Hopefully y'all got a chance to look at the plan itself. Excuse me, going to provide some highlights for you. We're going to start with the plan summary, and then an overview of the assumptions that were built into the plan, and then a review of our 3 major funds, the general fund, operating, rec fund, the golf fund, and then our capital plan, future challenges, and then some closing comments. So, plan summary. One of the main points built into this plan, I should say that the Finance Committee has reviewed the plan and the assumptions at our last meeting. The 2-year property tax freeze that we don't know for sure is going to happen. We're assuming it is, which is a worst case scenario, more conservative. We built that into this plan for years 2017 and 18. Again, as a reminder, what that means when we say property tax freeze, to the best we can tell of what that would be, it would be not taking an increase for CPI, but new construction would be allowed in that levy calculation. 2017 will mark our first year of operations at the Fort Hill Activity Center, and we had adjusted throughout this plan. You'll see a lot of the increases in revenues and corresponding increase in expenses relate to a full year of operations at the Activity Center. Having said that, we spent a lot of time, Brad and his team, developing a pro forma. Those pro forma numbers carry through this 3-year plan. So as a caveat, we say this plan, more than other years, is fluid and is built on a lot of assumptions. Our next plan, after we've had a full year of operations, we'll be able to nail down those operations better. So take part of this with a grain of salt and a very high level look as we look at the numbers and move forward. Just as a reminder, we did receive a AAA bond rating again in 2015. It was reconfirmed for not only the 15 issue, but our entire debt portfolio. And through this plan, based on reserve levels and where we are, we anticipate that AAA bond rating going forward in the future. In this plan, we are positioned to remain in a strong financial position with stable reserves, even with the event of the 2-year property tax freeze, and that's planning for it actually for the last year or two, even in our 16 budget. Funding for a capital, we know we have a very robust capital plan. We do still have a diverse source of funding sources for our capital plan. However, as we'll talk about, as we have in the past, there are some long-term challenges to funding capital for us. Alternative revenues, we recently did approve our alternative revenue plan. It will continue to be a focus for us. Two things I'll highlight, the Naperville Parks Foundation, and then new sponsorship opportunities related to the Fort Hill Activity Center, a couple major categories for non-tax revenues. And lastly, built into this plan, which we'll go through, are the assumptions is, and this continues, that we place as a district an emphasis on maintaining qualified, loyal, motivated workforce, and those benefits flow through the plan for the next several years. So let's get into, now these are some of the assumptions to build the revenues in 17 and 18. I mentioned the property tax freeze. Also in that, I estimated a 2% increase in EAV. That's probably conservative, but that's the way to do these plans. Conservative on the revenue side, more aggressive on the expenditure side to make sure that you're okay as you're looking forward. A 2% EAV increase would give us a little bit more for our special recreation levy for ADA-related improvements and would not be, as we know today, part of that tax freeze. Charges for services. Now this is a major category. Charges for services for this model includes everything through the rec fund and also charges for services in the golf fund itself. We're estimating a 19% increase in 2017. Again, as I go through these, they're mainly based on Fort Hill Activity Center. On the golf side, we're projecting a 2% increase in green fees both in 17 and 18, and that's just to keep up with increasing expenses in that fund. Sales.
I was gonna stop you just for a second. So when you say 19% increase in charges for services, you're not saying that soccer's gonna go up by 19%?
No.
You just mean total
So
dollars?
total, so
We
when,
should make it 19%.
New
Yes.
services, new programs.
Yeah.
right, and that encompasses, the way that the model works is we take a global approach and then we try and break it down if by fund it's really different. So we're not saying that golf is gonna increase 19%. Golf is only projecting a 2% increase, but overall, when we model a weighted average in total for their major funds, it's a 19% increase. And that flows through all these assumptions. Sales, which is merchandise sales and mainly concession, we're anticipating a 9.4% increase, and that's really based a lot on memberships for the Fort Hill Activity Center for an entire year of operations. Rental income, 10% increase in 2017, again based on the activity center, and also a little bit we've been in the process of implementing a new affiliate billing schedule and policy, and that has generated additional revenues for us in 16 and will also occur in 2017 with that new schedule. So really, that's a big picture of our revenues. We'll get into the numbers in a little bit. So on the expenditure side, knowing that we were going into 2 years of a potential property tax freeze, we took a hardline approach in this plan, and we're gonna, as we get to each budget year, obviously, depending what the circumstances are, we're gonna take each individual budget year, but to look out how we're gonna be doing over 2 years, the majority of our expenditures, except for some of the compensation and benefit things, were held to the 2016 budgeted amounts. That's always our baseline, the way we do our 3-year plan model. So in the past, what we had done is assumed a CPI increase on some of our expenses, our commodities, assuming we use the same amount of things, but prices are going to increase. That's how these models were built. On many of our line items, when we look at what we actually spent over time, we don't always spend an increase in CPI. Sometimes we keep it flatline. So for this plan and how we're going to have to budget going forward with that tax freeze is we're going to be challenged to hold expenses down to lower amounts, and it works on this plan model if we can do that. We did keep the same compensation allocation pool of 3% for 2017 and 18. That encompasses not only merit, but any kind of salary adjustments, range adjustments, or any bonuses that are awarded through the year. Wages. So we're back on the expense side. We're averaging about a 4% increase in wages, and that includes the 3% plus a little bit more for a full year at the activity center. And short-term wages is really where you're going to see that increase for an extra probably 6 or 7 months of labor in the Fort Hill Activity Center. So that's about a 10% increase in 17, and then a standard 2% in 18 when we already have a full year under our belt. Employee insurance, we will know going forward. This number was an estimate of 3% for a half a year in 17 and 6% in 18. Once we have more experience in the IPVC and have claim experience with them, we'll be able to go to them for projections of our rates. So we think these are reasonable, but again, we won't know until we have claim experience with them of what our rates are going to be. The good thing for this, employee insurance is a large expense for us, is when we did sign with them, we had an 18-month rate guarantee. So through half of 2017, we know our rates are going to remain flat, albeit the 3%. IMRF, we have been very fortunate over the past several years with the investment returns through IMRF that we have had. The investment returns and also changing the pension formula to have a tier 1 and tier 2 benefits have allowed 3 years of rate decreases for us. So as our payroll has increased, as our staff has even increased a little bit, our rates have gone down and our IMRF funding has remained flat or even has decreased from year to year. We know based on what happened in 15 with only returns of 0.32%, and we're starting with in 16, we would anticipate that there is going to be not huge rate increases because they smooth over 5 years, but we are going to have some rate increases in IMRF. We also are going to have several new positions that are IMRF eligible with the activity center, so our spending for our pensions will go up based on those two items. Okay, moving into our general fund. We'll start with an overview, and this is our fund balance with the darker blue representing what our actual fund balance is in the general fund.
Can I ask a question, Sue? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
On the IMRF rate, so is the rate actually, the contribution rate going up 2%?
So it's an estimate. At this point, we have not, it's too early for IMRF to give us, so I estimated a 2% rate, 2% increase in the rate for 17 and then another one in 18. It might be one.
Oh, so it's not the actual contribution rate, it's due to
It's due to
increased
the activity
employees.
center, right?
Well, no, there's two things. So the district, the employee's rate is fixed by statute, what we contribute at 4.5. And then IMRF does a calculation with their actuaries based on what the district in total has to give for IMRF. That district piece moves every year. Some years it's been higher. We're in single digits. We're at 9%. That 9.98 right now is what the district contributes per employee for pensions. That's our rate. That rate is going to increase. We've been as high as 12 to 13 in the past, and it's come down because of great investment returns. So the more money IMRF can make collectively, the less money that all the members have to contribute. When IMRF doesn't make 7.5 or more, it has to be made up, and that's made up through the employer contribution. So it's a combination of, we're going to pay more in IMRF because we have more people, and we're also going to have some slight, I don't know if it's 2%, I don't know if it's 1 or 0.5% increase in the rate that we do pay for all of our employees.
But you're confident it's going up?
I am confident it's going up just based on what I've heard from the actuary reports, but I'm not 100%, I can't say it's going to for sure until we get those numbers. And every employer's rate is calculated individually, so it's not like IMRF can give yet a total global projection yet for all of us. So we should know fairly soon at least a rate estimate for 17. I don't expect it to spike up. I expect that our rates for 17 are still going to be lower than what we were paying 2 or 3 years ago.
What IMRF does, as I understand, is that unlike some of the other state pension plans, if returns are projected at 7.5%, if they don't hit that 7.5, other plans just kind of let it go. IMRF adjusts on an annual basis. So that's how they've been able to stay in such a strong position, because they don't wait until it gets to a point where they're so far behind that they have to go to really significant increases, or get to a point where the plan isn't adequately funded, because IMRF is still in the mid to upper 80s as far as funding percentage for the total plan.
So it's like an insurance pool.
Yeah, right, and they monitor it, it's managed, so it's,
I hope I'm wrong. I would
Yeah.
love for them to come back and say, your rate's flat or another rate decrease, but for this, I wanted to plan for, more conservatively, plan for an increase, because we levy so many dollars, and remember, we have a pool, we have all different funds that we levy to. So IMRF has its separate levy, so if we need more in IMRF levy, then that leaves less, then we have to prorate our pool or a piece of pie to other things. So I want to make sure that we have enough here, that we don't ever have to go, uh-oh, we had a rate increase, we didn't plan for it, now we have less for operations and general fund. So I hope I'm wrong, I hope we don't have a rate increase. Excuse me, so the dark blue is our actual fund balance in the general fund itself, and the light blue behind it is our reserve target. So you can see, we've drawn down, our target has actually changed over time, where our target is increased because it's based on 6 months of operating expenses. So we do have reserves in 17 and 18 in that fund balance in the event for IMET, as we've talked about before with the 16 budget. So you can see those, just looking at the bar charts, they're fairly close. We are still above our minimum target, which is great, and that supports that AAA bond rating. So here's what the numbers look like. And you can look at the 16 budget is what we based everything on. In 2015, going back one column, our actual numbers, and then we put a little history for 13 and 14. So let's take a look at, we already know the 16 budget numbers, we talked about that at length. I'll just point out, just in case, because this is being taped, just a reminder that $523,000 deficit in 2016 is a planned drawdown. It is not a bad thing. We're transferring just over $400,000 for capital, and the other was anticipating some monies to open up the rec center. So just as a reminder, that's where we were. When you look in 17 for general operations, and go down to right here, and you'll see a transfer. So all of our revenues have all those assumptions built in, plus our expenditures. And then you can see here, without anything else, we have a $1.1 million available funds for, I wouldn't call it surplus, because of that, 1.1 million is going to be transferred into the rec fund. That happens every year to help cover the park maintenance costs. We always levy more, put more money in the general, because it's completely flexible to do what we want with those funds. With what we have here, we also have $51,000, if this were a perfect world and this worked exact, $51,000 that we'd be transferring to capital to make the general fund a zero, balance zero at the end of the year. If you can look over to 2018, the transfer to the rec fund, which we're going to get into next, required for that fund to balance is $1.3 million, and we would not have any money left over for capital funding. And that was one of the challenges I talked about going forward for capital, is we need more money for operations. It leaves us less that we can transfer into capital. But looking at this with the assumptions that were built into this plan, we would balance at zero, keep a strong fund balance over our minimum required targets. Okay. Recreation fund. And which you can see here's our rec fund, the same thing. The dark blue is our fund balance, with the light blue behind it being our reserve target. Recall that we did change our fund balance policy in 2016 for this fund to be based on 2 to 3 months of operating reserves versus half of the property tax levy, which you see those are 13 through 15 amounts. So we're reserving more in the rec fund because of, basically because of the activity center and the nature of the operations there. So our rec fund, we can also see we manage this fund to balance down to zero. So you can see, if you look on the 2017 forecast, the surplus and a deficit, you see the $1.1 million deficit, and then we transfer that in from the general fund for zero, and then the same works for 2018. So while you look at those large numbers of deficits, it's not a bad thing. It's the way we account for, here at this park district, that we account for park maintenance within the rec fund. The programs themselves, everything else generated through the rec fund, they produce a surplus. it's the whole park maintenance function in here that we need to transfer more money. Okay, we'll move on to golf. Same thing here, you can see our fund balance, and our fund balance is $842. We manage this fund to break even with the reserve targets below that of $736 for 16, and then moving forward, recall that the reserve target in the golf fund is based on our annual debt service. So that reserve target is going to move to the annual debt service, and we're keeping the fund balance flat. In this fund also, we're not adding to it. So if you look at what's going on in the golf fund, any kind of surplus in the golf fund, the way we have it structured now, is going to be transferred into capital. So you can see in the 16 budget, we anticipated a surplus of 207, 203 in 17, and 193 in 2018. Those monies get funneled out of golf into the capital, so that fund balance in golf is not growing anymore because we don't need it to. We have enough reserves in there. So with them, with holding flat on expenses and the 2% increase in some of our, greens fees, cart rentals and all of that, the golf fund is going to remain in good shape and can contribute to capital. Okay, our capital plan. It's always a biggie, and it continues to be that way. Our 3-year plan includes capital spending of $39 million. And in the back of the plan document itself, there's a list of what those projects are. I know you see that every year with Eric's work, and the board approves it. So that's also probably a little bit fluid, and I think there were changes to come even for the plan that you guys just adopted. So our capital funding plan, I just, in the past we've talked about why do we carry high balances, and if you look at that beginning fund balance, you can see in 13 we had 25 million, and that was a plan, and we're down for forecasting in 18 to $5 million. It is not a bad thing. We knew we had money in the bank for a facility, and we've been building that facility, and we're using some of those funds that were on hand. We do not have to borrow for the activity center, and we've been using those. So the $5 million fund balance in 18 is what I would consider our typical fund balance without any large facilities going on. $5 million is a comfortable amount to keep there for anything that comes unexpected to maintain what we have. That's, to me, the capital fund does not have a stated fund balance policy because it moves up and down sporadically depending on what we're doing, if we're borrowing or what comes in and out, but I'd say $5 million is a nice, comfortable place to be, especially with over assets that we have over $250 million in assets that we maintain every year through all our park systems. And then you can see we're drawing down, we surplus or deficit, we're going to do another drawdown in 17 based on those projects, and then in 18, if everything goes as planned, we're projected to have a surplus of $230,000, which will just drop down to the fund balance there. So in summary, I think the lessons or the purpose of this plan helps us is that we know we can continue for the next couple years with our mission, facing the challenges and the uncertainties of what the state is going to bring our way, and be prepared for that. We have strong reserves, and we will continue to maintain that for the next couple years. Our major programs that we do are supported by our stable revenue sources, as I had mentioned. Programs provide a surplus for us, enough to help offset the administrative costs such as marketing and administration for those plans. We will continue to evaluate all of our programs to maintain affordable rates, but also keep up with the cost of increasing costs for us to provide that. And again, always keep an eye everything we do on our AAA bond rating.
Sue, I have a question for you.
Yes.
With our capital fund balance going down to about $5 million,
Yeah.
and that's in 2019, 18. So that if we were to build out Southwest Community Park or do some sort of field house or something in the, what were we thinking, 22?
2024?
2024. It's not likely then that our reserves will have built up to a point where
No.
we have. So at that time, we'd have to borrow
Yes.
or go for a
Yeah,
friend.
and if you recall, the last bond issue we did in 15, we did a barbell. And we did that looking forward to be able to give the board flexibility to do larger projects. So what you are seeing here in the plan we're on, we would be doing non-referendum bond issue before we would be doing Southwest Community Park. If that was kind of the plan, or any other large opportunity, that the way they pop up here, I think 2019, 2020, we have room in our levy if we wanted to do a new bond issue. So that gives you flexibility as another funding source for our capital plan.
Sue, if I may, on the recreation fund,
Yeah.
the big jump in charge for services from 2015 to 2016 is the activity center, half year, and then the eatery.
Correct, so 2015 actuals, right, to the 2016 budget, yes.
So the big jump from 2016 to 2017 is a full year of the activity center
Correct, and then
as it ramps up and more people get memberships.
yeah, because we only programmed, right, Brad,
We
six
budgeted
months?
6 months.
6 months
for
in
2016.
16, so we'll have a whole nother half year of new revenues we're anticipating in 17 for a full year.
Because the numbers don't really compute.
Are memberships services or sales?
That is under charges for
The
services.
services.
Okay, but in the eatery, he had mentioned the eatery is really sales, right? It's not services.
Correct.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Okay,
Eatery
all right,
would be-
it's fine.
And there's other, slight 2% increases in golf. We've got some increases, smaller, very small amounts built in some program fees that we know because expenses increase, so it's not 100% activity center, but it's the majority.
Comments, questions, anything else? No.
Yep, I think, yeah. Actually, I do have one thing, as part of our capital, I'm gonna pass it over to Eric, and he's going to give us an update.
I have a handout for the.
Of course.
And this is a list of capital projects we discussed with the Parks and Rec Committee last Friday. This is part of the Park District policy, the process within the policy. Every year, we evaluate the capital overview, the 10-year plan. Brad, Ken, and I had a chance to sit down a few weeks back before presenting this to the Parks and Rec Committee last Friday, and we identified some positioning adjustments of projects within the 10-year plan, as well as some new projects. I'd just like to take a moment and present these, see if there's any questions from the board this evening. And then as far as the next step, the Park District will go back, update the 10-year capital overview based on the input received from the Park Board. And then that'll be part of a weekly packet, so as a board, you'll receive that information. And then shortly thereafter, we'll start talking about our summer tour. At this time, we're thinking maybe at the May workshop, our meetings held at the administration building. And then shortly thereafter, we can go over to the local activity center and see the report. So that's kind of our thoughts as staff for the board at this time. But looking at the list, the first section is new capital improvement projects for consideration and possible implementation in 2017. So these would be projects we're suggesting to add to the 10-year plan. First one is the Atwater Development Phase 1 neighborhood. This is part of the land cash dedication donation. The Naperville Park District will be receiving 1.2 acres. And we think once we receive it, we should move forward and develop that playground. Next project is the Nationals Nature Center Storage Edition. During the design and construction of that project and the looking at value engineering as well as some maintenance mechanical systems got larger. It actually took away storage space. So we're asking the board for us to explore the possibility of expanding Ramsden Nature Center like a small addition for the purposes of storage. And this is something we can report back to the board. The thought is to touch base with White Construction, have a discussion and see what we can do, and then report back to the board and see what our options are and what are the costs, and we kind of go from there. The next section is existing capital improvement projects. This is where in the case where implementation schedule is proposed to be shifted or removed. The first one is the Bainbridge Green sidewalk extension to Brookdale Elementary School. We recommend shifting that out from 2018 to 2020. At this time, this was a request that maybe came up a while back, I don't know if it was from a resident like several years ago, but at this point, working with school district officials, it seems to be an interest to add the sidewalk. So we're not saying remove it from the 10-year plan, but just kind of shift it out and see if more interest or need develops. Next project is Burlington Park site furnishings and trail connection. With the recent expiration of the Forest Preserve District DuPage County leases on the property, we recommend pulling this out of the 10-year plan. Next is Central Park light pole, parking lot, and sidewalk renovations. After discussion with staff, we identified this project would actually have to be moved up in the 10-year plan because of the current condition of the light poles and sidewalks. This is something that needs to be sooner rather than later. Next is Frontier Sports Complex ball field renovations. These are the 2 ball fields adjacent to the freshman center. It's a shift from 2017 to 2018. Our staff thinks it could go another year, and we don't need to renovate it as soon as originally anticipated. Next is Hobson West Ponds improvements. This is something with the acquisition of property we found over the years that residents really like the passive recreation. And the improvements was the addition of a parking lot, trails, and what we found is that Kevin's folks, as they mow the trails and the native grasses that they have out there now, that's really well received. So we're suggesting to remove it from the 10-year plan, like any additional improvements. Now again, this could be something that we can evaluate with the upcoming community interest and opinion survey, when we hear input about this, or something through the strategic plan process. We can always add it back to the list, but we think at this time, the residents really like it. It helps Kevin with the maintenance. He's not mowing turf grass. We have native grasses, and it's really a nice fit in the community. Next is the Kendall Park backstop renovation. Kevin's folks are actually able to make some minor repairs and improvements to the backstop, so we don't even need to do that project anymore, so we're suggesting to pull it from the list. Kendall Park sidewalk installation. This was on the list from last year. Consider recycled rubber sidewalk and related grant opportunities. As we all know, that property is owned by the city of Naperville, and the city has opportunities with the CDBG grant program and other grant opportunities that we further discuss this with them before pulling the trigger. So we wait another year, so we're suggesting shifting that out to 2018. And lastly, Veterans Park detention basin development by the city. After discussions, as part of this process with city staff, they identified this project is probably more going to be done in 2019, so we're suggesting to shift that out 2 years. And then the last section, capital improvement projects to be further evaluated and possibly discussed with the park board. After conducting the next community interest and opinion survey strategic plan, as we know both of those items are slated for next year, is Nike Sports Complex platform tennis. We'll see if there's any interest in that. This is a park staff request, and it's really more driven by maintenance and handling that site after heavy rains, but the Ronald Community Garden plots suggesting a curb and gutter along the gravel walkways. Ultimately, this would require further discussion with the city of Naperville because they own the property, but just something that they have on the list for further discussion and consideration. Next is retention basin sediment removal at various parks. Some of you may recall at an earlier Parks and Rec Committee meeting, Kevin and I had a chance to present what they call a bathymetric survey. It's a survey of the water level, and it showed the differences from when it was first built several years ago as a subdivision to what it is now, and how much sediment has filled into that retention basin. And we see this as one, and the reason why we did this is because it's very difficult for Kevin and staff to maintain these ponds with that sediment, because the depth, let's say originally was like 10 feet, and now it's shrunk down to maybe 5 or 6 with all the sediment, and it's hard even with aerators to keep them clean and keep the algae and all the other vegetation out of the pond. So through the discussions that Kevin and I had last year, working with Ray, we commissioned a study we presented to the Parks and Rec Committee, and it's something that we plan on following up with the city of Naperville on, and seeing if maybe we can partner in cleaning some of these ponds out with all the sediment. So it's just something up and coming that's on our list. And then lastly is Sportsman Park Pond Shoreline Restoration. With the restoration project last year, receiving an NFR letter from the Illinois EPA. There's some sections around the pond that were fine, but they have a lot of native species. And the thought is kind of bring the rest of the site up to speed along with the DuPage County what they have as their requirements, as well as our requirements for shoreline, is to start considering removing the invasive species, flattening out the slopes along the shoreline, and adding native type aquatic plant material. But again, it's something we can further consider after conducting the community interest survey and strategic plan.
Before I open it up for discussion, the Parks and Rec Committee would like to weigh in.
You know, we discussed them all and everything made sense. We had some questions on Hobson West, you know. My thinking was doing nothing consistent with their mission and why we bought the place, but Eric indicated that it's getting a lot of traffic as is, so that was good enough for us. Nothing else really struck a chord.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
The one thing I think we talked a lot about was the retention basins, that we should move those up, because it's important to get those things done. We talked about that a little bit. I think if it helps us to maintain the parks better,
Right.
our own people, I think we should be moving that up as priorities, because it's easier for them to do their job. So, you know, if that's true with the curb and gutter for the garden plots, well, I think we should certainly consider those.
At that meeting, we also talked about the Knocknolls Nature Center storage addition. That's early on this agenda. First thing that came into my mind was maybe the public will say, well, why didn't you just do this right the first time? It's just such a short window, and Brad was able to explain that, as he did today, that the mechanicals changed to the point that some of that storage was taken up, and it really, based on Brad's explanation, it really would have to be an addition that's part of the same building as opposed to, for example, off-site storage where in the cold conditions you're going out and bringing things in and taking things out. So that, after the explanation, that made sense, albeit at first it seemed like, again, the public might say, why didn't you just, why was this not done before?
And I think it's also, part of it is because we've had so much use of it too.
Sure.
A lot of use, and it's the type of use within the classrooms as well. During the day, we've got preschool, environmental preschool classes that are in those rooms. Those programs are maxed out. But then we're also utilizing the rooms in the evenings for different workshops, programs for older youth, adults, on weekends. And really, that's the biggest operational challenge that we have with that building right now is the storage and the transition of those rooms.
How much are you looking for in terms of square footage?
Well, that's something that we'd like to engage an architect to be able to take a look at the site. And really, it's a storage area for some of the larger equipment items. The tables, chairs, and then we have a lot of preschool equipment for as opposed to environmental preschools that get moved in and out of the rooms as we transition those. And as Eric mentioned, as we were going through the construction process with that building, we had to make some changes within the field, specifically with some of the mechanical systems. And they are now in spaces that we are still utilizing for storage, but it has taken up and has created some challenges with storage tables, chairs, and so on.
Anybody else? Any comments, questions?
The only thing I was thinking about with Hobson West, I don't think a parking lot would be appropriate. I thought were we talking about extending the Sensory Walk or something down to that area? And that kind of thing, I think would be in line with the same sort of open space idea, but maybe we're gonna put some signs and some things for.
Yeah, and I think the city of Naperville, they were also looking to spearhead something like that, to have some type of walk system and interpret signage.
Yeah.
And that's something I know our planning department staff is participating in. I haven't heard any updates from the city, but I know they're looking at neighbor settlement, other downtown businesses, and I thought that maybe we can roll that into this idea of extending it up to Hobson West Farms, down through the Carillon Market Venture properties and downtown Naperville. So I mean, we can definitely check, see where the city is on that, but we thought it would be a good fit to kind of have that discussion with all these organizations together.
Yeah.
And a portion of that too included use of an audio tool.
Yeah, that's
Right.
what I was
Right,
wondering.
and the thought
that, I had two capital project updates under that item, and it relates to the list. Everything's, related. So as I spoke about Atwater Development, I received a call a couple weeks ago from the executive director with Ride, Illinois. It's a not-for-profit biking group, and he had some really good ideas. And as you may recall, with the Atwater Development in Country Lakes Park, at one time there was a proposal to run like a 12-foot wide asphalt path. It was actually an emergency road. And we had concerns of running that next to the sled hill and the berm and the playground. And so the developer worked to nix that from the program. But the idea of extending a sidewalk, like right now to the north of Country Lakes Park, there is a cul-de-sac there. We have a sidewalk connection. And the thought is there's a small outlot that Pulte Homes with their Atwater Development, they have. And so we contacted them, had discussion with them, and asking them would they be open to adding a sidewalk in that outlot to our new donated property to the south of 5.7 acres, and we can run it along the west side and connect to the existing sidewalk. So if folks that live in the new Atwater subdivision, they can ride their bikes, they can walk, they can bring their children in strollers, they can come down through that outlot, our new sidewalk on our property, and they connect to the existing and come right into Country Lakes Park. And Country Lakes Park is a community park. It also will be serving Atwater Development. So we thought it was a good idea, but we wanted to let you know, because then we can ask Pulte to come up with some concepts or plans, and then later they'll include it in their phases of development. And what we'll probably do, the portion of sidewalk that would be developed on Park District's new property, we would reimburse them for that, but we would ask them to construct it in the constructors of their property. And then the second item was the, just Knoxville's Nature Center. As you probably noticed, when you walk to the center, you see the big bridge and all the clearing of the invasive materials kind of cleaned that up. But as you look further down that stream, as it goes into the river, there's a lot of invasive materials and there's a lot of erosion along the stream bank. So we had a project slated in the 2016 capital plan in the amount of $40,000 to do stream bank restoration. We recently had a bid opening on that, and the low responsive bidder came at $32,000. We plan to bring the contract to board for consideration at 10.
Anything else? We're still on Sue's point?
Yeah.
To wrap up the long-range plan, it'll be on the next board agenda for approval.
Okay. Next item, sponsorships.
Okay, thank you. So I asked Brett Lindahl, who is our partner relations manager, to attend last week's Parks and Rec Committee meeting to give an overview on where we are with sponsorships, a little bit of history, and also talk about some of the opportunities that are available with regard to the forthcoming Fort Hill Activity Center. Is that something that my staff and I have been working on, developing sponsorships along those lines. So very quickly, just want to give you a brief overview on the history of our program. The Naperville Park District has been doing sponsorships since about 2002. It's primarily been focused on events and program sponsorships, so certainly the Activity Center presents new opportunities, new challenges for us to kind of embark in new territory. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
And as Sam mentioned, going back to 2002, I can speak back to 2012 when I joined the district in late October 2011. So since then, in 2012, that first year that I was on board, sponsorships were at $108,000. In 2013, we reached $113,000. 2014, we were at $127,000. And last year, we reached $156,000. So we've shown the opportunity for continuous growth and continuous improvement. On a percentage increase from 12 to 13, we got a 5% increase. From 13 to 14, a 12% increase, then a 23% increase last year. A lot of that success has been the opportunities to selecting the right partners, finding the right fits for them, and being able to retain them. We're about at 80 to 85% retention rate year to year. So that's been a key part of the success with the partnership opportunities. But as Sam mentioned, with the Fort Hill Activity Center come on board, we certainly have some new opportunities to grow the sponsorship and advertising program. And Fort Hill is obviously a big point, a big opportunity for us there. So we're looking to build upon some of those existing partnerships that we have, reach out to community members in and surrounding Naperville for new partnerships that we can find relationships that are mutually beneficial to us, the private organization, and then the community as well. So as we look further in depth at private-public partnerships to this level, district-wide, statewide, it's been relatively limited. However, there have been a little bit of a moving trend and desire, obviously, for the district to be a little bit more innovative, figure out ways to partner with public entities and sustain our reputation as a model agency, as a model district. So we are currently in the process of soliciting opportunities at Fort Hill Activity Center. Opportunities range from the overall naming rights to subsets within the facility, whether it's the fitness center, the gym space, the walk jog track, and even possibly extending that to some of the multi-purpose rooms. To kind of get the process started, we established a cross-functional team made up of the marketing department, finance, HR, and recreation. And a big factor of that was when Sue Nance, the new operations manager for Fort Hill, came on. She was able to provide a lot of historical data at the stops that she'd been before, and really get a better understanding of what we can expect for usage and the number of bodies that will actually service within that facility, therefore being able to add a better value to the opportunities and assets that we have to offer. So starting at the top level with the naming rights, the goal would be to seek a 10-year term for that, and then on the interior elements, a minimum of 3-year term. There have been, as I mentioned, some similar partnerships with the private-public sector. Most recently, Rockford Park District brought on 2 partners. Really over the last 4 months or so, one at their new facility they're building, the UW Sports Factory, or UW Health Sports Factory, so UW Health out of Wisconsin is their partner for that. That facility, they're anticipating about 500,000 annual visitors, and they signed a 10-year, $1.75 million deal, so $175,000 per year for naming rights to that facility. It'll primarily be indoor programming space, gym space, basketball, things along those lines, a lot of court sports. And then the other property, they brought on Mercy Health for Sports Core 1 and 2. They packaged those 2 properties together. It's about 180 total acres of an indoor sports complex there as well on that property. And between the 2 facilities, or 2 properties, it's a 10-year, $2 million deal, so $200,000 per year. And they get about 600,000 visitors annually between those 2 parks.
So what are they going to call them, Mercy 1, Mercy 2?
They're sticking to, so it's Mercy Sports Core 1 and Mercy Sports Core 2, so they didn't get too creative.
All right.
But I guess the good news is they didn't lose identity since those were existing properties as well. And Sports Core 1 and 2 have really been in existence for, I've worked there as a kid, so 30 plus years for sure. Yeah. And then a little closer to home, Romeoville last January signed a deal with Edward Hospital for their new facility, which is more so a basketball-driven. The basketball courts are able to be moved, reconfigured, things along those lines. I was not able to get any usage numbers from them, but the agreement is a 5-year, $500,000, so $100,000 per year. And then one of the original partnerships was Joliet with ATI Physical Therapy. So it's ATI Field at Memorial Stadium, which hosts a lot of high school, college football games, and they experience about 300,000 visitors per year. They signed a 5-year, $350,000 deal. So that's about it is $70,000 per year, excuse me. So as we move forward here in Naperville and looking to attract partners, we assembled a prospect list, actually mailed out prospect letters earlier this week, and are currently working to establish some meetings and build upon those relationships. We've created a standard presentation that we're just tweaking to finalize, but it'll be capable to customize to individual partners. And I think that'll be the big component of this, is sitting down, listening to them, seeing what their specific interest levels are, and how we can customize it to fit the needs for both their purposes as well as continue to serve ours. That's pretty much where we're at with that.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, we talked about this at the Parks and Recreation Committee meeting, and I think the committee is confident now that we're moving in the right direction on this. And I mean, Rockford and Romeoville are classrooms, the money's out there. I mean, it's not impossible. It's certainly not going to be easy, getting big checks for those amounts. But I think if we focus on the right categories, businesses that are concerned about health and wellness, or families with young children, some of our, right within our wheelhouse, as opposed to just taking a shotgun approach and just going alphabetical A to Z. So I think I look forward to the updates, in the months to come to see what we can get to hit here. And if we can help in any way, I don't want to speak for everybody, but if we can help in any way in sitting on meetings or things like that, happy to do it.
Anything else on sponsorships? Okay. Fort Hill Activity Center public Wi-Fi.
All right, this is exciting stuff. So,
Not as exciting as grass seed.
that's true. Very true.
Hang on.
Like,
We're not gonna have rapers on that one?
yeah, no.
Grass seed is always
All right, the pressure's on now, right? I gotta
Yeah, that's
deliver.
right.
So what I'm proposing is essentially a change of design to the previously proposed public Wi-Fi at the Fort Hill Activity Center. I'm going to talk about the current design and what its flaws are and what its pros are. I'm going to talk about what the next proposed design is and what its focus is on customer experience and the customer service. I'm going to talk about cost and an exit strategy, so that's important, as well as the possible providers, and then I'll touch on possible expansion to other locations, after we're done. So you can think of the current design as a 4-lane highway. And essentially what you do through the use of software and virtual local area networking basically just means you slice off one of the lanes and you create a network that can then be used by the public leveraging your current network, right? So on the left-hand side, on our 3 lanes, you have credit cards, employee files, sensitive data, best effort delivery, meaning that everything's configured to where if there is a slowdown on the network, your most important services are what's going to get passed through. So if we're having a slowdown, you're not going to be able to get to YouTube, but you're going to be able to make a phone call, right? So that's the whole purpose of it. That's also where our cameras are travel through and our voice over IP phones. Some of the pros of this is obviously the cost, because it's already contained, we're already paying for this, it's already accounted for. Works with the current number of users when we talk about the other side, and I'll touch on that again. And we have a high control of limiting the browsing and what people can do on that. So when you go to the right side now, and why it's important to consider why it works with our current number of users. As you know, we have Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi at a lot of our facilities, but they're not really heavily utilized when it comes to the service itself. So to give you an example, the highest usage I've seen in monitoring our enterprise solution for Wi-Fi is like 12 connections at the RCC when there's an iPad, senior iPad class, and that's 12 at a time. Now, that's obviously going to change with the demographics at the Fort Hill Activity Center. On this side, you have people trying to reach Facebook chat, which is a bandwidth hog. I mean, that is like one of the worst, especially when you count the little GIFs, the emoticons, and all that stuff. Netflix, also bandwidth hog. Pandora, Spotify, YouTube. Now, I mention those because currently the way the system's designed to work, if I'm sitting next to Sue and I'm trying to watch a Netflix show and all she's trying to do is get to her email, it's going to give her a better service and then start to buffer me to where I'm either going to jump off or have to pause every couple of minutes to watch what I'm trying to watch. And that's by design. Some of the cons is you have to throttle that bandwidth, exactly what I just talked about. You have to limit the amount of users, and it's not as secure with the proposed foot traffic at Fort Hill. Now, I don't want to mislead anybody in saying like, oh, it's scary. It can be scary when you're talking about the amount of foot traffic we're going to have at that facility. Okay. So what I'm proposing is a secondary line for just the public Wi-Fi traffic. That would allow us to give a better customer experience to our customers when someone comes in. they can Netflix binge watch Breaking Bad on one of the cardio machines if they so desire. And we wouldn't have to limit the quality of that. More likely to stay longer, we can always argue those kind of things. I feel that it would be a greater, proposed value for the customer as well. And the other purpose for us would be to use it as a redundant line. So if our main line ever went down, we could always say, hey guys, we're sorry, we're having issues. We're going to shut off the public Wi-Fi for the time being so that we can still take phone calls, we can still process transactions and take care of our customers and staff. Another pro is that we can bundle it with the cable that we're going to need at the Fort Hill Activity Center anyways for the cardio machines and the multiple TVs out there. Some of the cons, obviously the cost and unknown usage. I think that we have some data that I'm going to give you here in this packet that could justify the use of it, but I honestly don't know. I can't tell you so many people are going to use it, so many people aren't. I just don't have the metrics, or we don't have that kind of facility to where I could give you those kind of statistics. Regardless of the provider, we would choose some kind of filtering so that even if we do have a separate line, we can filter it if we so desire. So, cost. This is the most aggressive cost that I've seen so far. You will receive 2 different proposals in here. Still waiting on one from Comcast, and I'll touch on that too. So this would be $875 a month for 50 meg connection. Now that's what's recommended for the opening of the facility. We can always turn it down or turn it up. And it's priced accordingly. So obviously the more you go down in bandwidth, the cheaper it is. The more you go up, the more expensive it is. For cable, we have multiple options, and then I'll touch on that as well. For any of these possible connection solutions that we're choosing to go with, whether we stay with our current design or we go to the other design, all that equipment was already budgeted for in the project. So we wouldn't have to buy more equipment. It can handle what I'm proposing. Exit strategy. So typically, these are 36-month agreements with the exception of one, which is the most aggressive one, which is the best one, honestly. They would like a 5-year contract. We're still going to require cable regardless, so we can choose to bundle it or not, we're still going to need the cable. Like I mentioned, we can turn it up or down. 50 is recommended for the opening, and there is an addendum built into one of the proposals for early termination to where as long as we cancel prior to the construction, we're okay. We're not on the hook for anything. And that is meaning to other locations as well, so I'll talk about that as well. So I was adding a new expense. We got to look at how to offset that new expense, right? And that's where I brought in Brett to see what we could do. We pursued signage, advertising opportunities. One of the proposals does have an option for deferred payments and then sponsorships, and I'll let Brett take it.
Yeah, so Omar definitely had the most success working with WOW, which is based here in Naperville. He's a strong presence in Naperville. And when we were working with them initially, the thought was for in-kind opportunities to bring down some of that hard cost, the monthly cost. They weren't as receptive to that, but they are willing to provide cash for sponsorship opportunities in exchange. So essentially accomplishing the same mission of bringing in funds, which will reduce the new expense. So where we're at with WOW is still kind of in the discussions of what they're looking for, how can we partner along those lines. But in their proposal that Omar will share, they have earmarked up to $5,000 per year to spend with the district on advertising and sponsorship opportunities. So it's not outrageous, but it certainly does make an impact on the total cost of the operation.
Yeah, and that's really important because they're a service provider and they're willing to give us money. That's like, you usually get those incentives like refer a friend, or, we'll charge you like $20 for 6 months and then it's $100. So they're actually willing to, play nice with us and realize that it's a huge expense and we have to justify it. They also, I will include in here, I finally got the metrics for Santa House, it's really interesting metrics, but they already committed over $5,000 to provide that connection for that month. Now, $5,000 sounds huge for 1 month, but you have to keep in mind that was installed for a temporary fix. I mean, they ran a cable through underneath the Riverwalk from another location. They had to send out a bunch of surveyors. So that's why typically those costs are so high. But some of the providers that I reached out to, Comcast, needless to say, they weren't very responsive. They can provide a MDTA unit for cable solution, meaning it's one device that you route everything to. Now, there's pros and cons to that, but I have yet to get actual pricing on it. Pending a site survey, the customers can be held liable for the cost of getting the service into the facility. So they could charge us to bring the service into our building. I don't know yet. They sent someone out yesterday, but they sent them to the wrong location. They sent them to Naperville Nature Center, which we already have Comcast internet at, and not to the right location. So, not a big surprise there.
Did you give them the address?
Yeah, I did. Oh, then I was told that I had to reinitiate an order, even though I had made the original order to have them go to the right location. So, then we, by the way, all of them were reached out to as well in the opportunities to offset the cost. So to all of them, I said, you know, let's work together with some advertising, sponsorship, something, right? Comcast came back with basically a pricing list and said, this is what you have. AT&T, they can't provide cable because they only have dish, and we could have dish, but that would be multiple receivers as well, or a really big receiver and multiple boxes. So not ideal for what we want to do. They can bring the service into the facility at no cost, meaning the internet connection, and there's a proposal in here that they provided. Just ballpark number, was about 1,300. You'll see it in there for the connection. While they proposed what I feel is the preferred Wi-Fi solution and the best pricing, we can bundle that with the cable and Wi-Fi. You'll see the pricing in there. The Wi-Fi pricing is not affected if we choose to go with a different provider for cable. In their cable proposal, it also includes a sports package, which I know is something that we've been looking for, and not in like an outrageous cost. They will bring the service to the facility at no cost. They're willing to commit sponsorship dollars. They're the ones that offered the deferred payment as an option, and as well as allowing the addendum for early termination of the contract liability. So, not really the questions yet, because I want to pass this out and give you guys a chance to look at it, and we can look through it together.
While you're passing that out, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
The last point that you had on the addendum with termination of the contract prior to construction, does that really mean anything? I mean, the chances of us terminating the contract before we start, construction seems so minor that...
So it does in the sense that, I hadn't mentioned this yet, is that we have the opportunity with them to light up the Carillon Tower as well as Centennial Beach.
Okay.
But there's more to that, so I didn't want to just mention it without going into detail.
Okay, so that termination addendum could have some value to us. 'Cause
Exactly.
Just on its face, it seems to me like, who cares?
Yeah, no, I'm with you, definitely. So if you guys grab your packets and you go to the AT&T one, which looks like this, it's the one with the blue, and then you turn to the last page of that packet. Sorry guys, I know there's a lot going flipping through. You'll see their pricing is a total of $13.28. And that's for the total cost of the internet connection at that facility. And then if you look at the WOW proposal, which has the big nice WOW logo, and you open it up to the first and second page, this is where on the left-hand side, you'll see the pricing for the 3 locations, if we were so inclined to do that. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see pricing just for the Fort Hill Activity Center. Now, this is assuming we want to light up those locations and we want to commit to something like that. My proposal would be that we first focus on the Fort Hill Activity Center. And I am looking at options to lease equipment, because we know that the price tag to provide our own infrastructure at the Centennial Beach is to the tune of $60,000 to do it right. I mean, there is a scaled back model of around 30. So what I'm looking at is maybe leasing that so we could pilot it for a summer or something like that, if the numbers make sense to do that. But that's only if we were to decide to go with the 3 locations, right? So what I would want to focus on is the page with the Fort Hill activity pricing, center pricing. The internet would be $878. The cable TV would be $436, and that's simply because they're accounting for HD receivers there for the cardio equipment. If we don't need HD receivers for the cardio equipment, that brings it back down to $237 a month for the cable, which is on the left-hand side of that paper. I know it's not very user-friendly to look at, but if you look at cable TV, it goes non-HD pricing is $237. Okay, so there's that information. So it would be total just a little bit over to bundle internet and cable with HD option, just as much as getting just internet with AT&T. Now, if you switch, yeah.
Yeah, you talk about HD in the cardio center. Do we have flat screen TVs in other areas?
We have, there's a total of 22 TVs throughout the facility, including the overhead projectors.
Okay.
Within the different rooms that will be in the corridors, rooms, conference room, and in the fitness area. In addition to that, each piece of cardio equipment will have a built-in TV to where you can watch it.
So the non-cardio equipment, is that going to be HD?
Yeah, it's not very, I apologize, I just didn't want to touch what they were giving us. If you look at this line right here, it says 22 HD TVs and 46 non. That would be the cardio equipment, it would be the non-disclosure on it. So yes, it would have the 22 TVs that are flat screens as displays as HD displays.
Okay, so then, maybe I'm confusing myself. So was the no HD number of 237?
That would be the total price of having nothing be HD.
Including the other TVs that was?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe I was confusing myself and you at the same time. So yes.
I'm easy.
Yeah, so I apologize. Yeah, that 237 would be nothing HD.
Okay.
So you can see where HD has a big, price increase because it's a service that has to be delivered. Question?
Yeah, Omar presented this to the Parks and Rec Committee this past Friday, higher level version, not as much detail, and I think the consensus of the group, certainly speak for myself. Number 1, this is Naperville. Number 2, this is a brand new state-of-the-art facility. If people are in there and it's like Southwest Airlines where you're trying to do the Wi-Fi, it's buffering, and it's just get people angry.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of egg on everybody's face. So, Omar, I think this analysis is excellent, a lot more detail than we've ever seen before, and I know you've been hustling to get this worked out. And WOW seems to be clearly the best partner. They partner with us on the Santa House. They're enthusiastic and interested in being involved with us. So, I would support going down the recommended path here again with Omar having done a lot of the legwork and that. I mean, we got to do this first class, and I think again having Wi-Fi problems, people are just going to look at us like we're crazy. It's the year 2016. It's a state-of-the-art brand new facility.
Jim?
Did Comcast give us any basic number about what their 50 megabyte connection is?
So they're pending a site survey, which has taken forever.
Yeah.
And honestly, in my past experience, they typically just give me a pricing sheet. Here you go. This is the pricing.
Do you know what their standard pricing is for 50?
I know that it's around what AT&T proposed. They're really close. That's one of the reasons why WOW was so aggressive with their pricing. Because we already do business with AT&T and Comcast, we don't do any business with WOW right now. And they still donated their connectivity for that month. I mean, I think that has a lot to say with them, especially being service, that they're willing to give us at least something, where the other providers aren't. They're not offering anything to us.
Yeah.
Does anyone here use WOW? You use WOW? You like WOW?
I only pay 50,000.
You what?
I only pay 51. But I don't get to maybe 12.
Exactly.
If you guys go to this sheet, I'm just gonna, I think we got a consensus, but I just want to go over a couple more things. This is what their proposed construction costs are for each location. Really, again, I wanna focus on Fort Hill Activity Center. That's what they would pay to get into our building. And then the last thing, you guys have this now, so you can go through it at your leisure. Last thing I wanna go over is the Santa House recap, and that's, oh yeah.
Take me through that page once more. Who's paying what to whom?
Oh, okay. So, no, that's a fair statement. So they would be paying,
You're all about the form?
that's their proposed cost of what they are gonna have to pay to get their service into our facility. That's no charge to us.
Okay.
That's their infrastructure cost. That's a location that currently doesn't have anything
So
other than.
these are their costs?
Yes,
So I can file this under I don't care?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, pretty much. Pretty much. The last packet is Santa House free public Wi-Fi recap. And that has, invoices that we did not pay. They were zeroed out, but that's what both companies would have charged us to do the service for that month. And it also has some metrics here. So if we look at that first page, Brett and I averaged out the last 8 years of attendance to Santa House, which is around 6,150 people. So now we're taking some assumptions, so these aren't straight statistics, but as good as we could do. If you're assuming that you have a family of 4, that equals out to 1,537 families. And if you're assuming that 50%, at least 50% of those people would connect to that Wi-Fi that we provided, that would have been 768. What we had was a total of 872, which means more than half of the people that walked through there connected to it. Now, it was in a public area, so that could not all be, Santa House traffic. You also got to keep in mind Santa House was open, only in the evening times most of the time. Some of the nights, such as special needs nights, pet nights, and employee nights, is when people don't really have to wait anyways. So those you probably wouldn't get that much traffic on those nights either. So yeah, I just wanted to present that. If you look at the page after that, that's the actual report provided by the company for the usage. And I just wanted to provide that as a, people are using it when we do provide it. And that's probably even people that had no clue, because we did have like 2 to 3 signs up there, and a lot of people aren't paying attention because they are on their phones and could have missed that completely. So with that, I'm done, and now really, if you have any questions.
What about the deferred payment? What were they proposing for that?
So that was actually my idea, because I knew that I was adding a cost that we hadn't necessarily budgeted for, and I said, would there be any opportunity for us to catch up the year after, either within a couple months, a couple payments,
Like
or
gauge your usage and go forward from there?
yeah. So we could do that.
So with the 5-year contract, do we have any outs if they're not performing or service isn't working well?
So we can always,
Obviously, if those are their costs, they're investing a little bit up front, so they're not just gonna let us out easily. So again, 5 years is a pretty long time. I see why, because of capital investment costs, but what repercussions do we have if we're not satisfied?
so we can do a prorated term, and from my understanding, it can be up to 75% of the term, but we could always also turn it down and measure out, is it more worth it to just turn it down and write it out, or pay for those fees to terminate. When I brought this up, Dirk did mention that we actually wouldn't have to do more than a 3-year contract per some kind of statute that protects us.
Yeah, the district statute.
Yeah, so that's a possibility for us as well.
My experience with WOW is that they're much more focused on customer service than Comcast or AT&T. Once you got AT&T, you can never see another person or contact them again. And Comcast, it's like they could care less. A lot of people.
I'd also say similar to our other agreements, and with working with Dirk, typically there's always a way for us to be able to terminate the contract if we find that the service just is not working out.
biggest problem with WOW right now is that they can't service all the areas that people are asking. But if they can service our area, I would be fairly certain that it would be pretty good service.
Right, so this is based on 50 megs a month. What's the minimum we could go down to?
I believe it's 10, so it's around 200 something, or it could even be cheaper than that.
Okay, is the cost per meg, is it relatively the same going up or going down?
Yes. Yep, so it basically increases about 100 whether you go up 10 megs and go down 10 megs.
Okay.
So are you looking for?
I just wanted to discuss it,
Go on the agenda next meeting, or?
Yeah, is this something we want to pursue? Do you want more, I mean, I can keep trying to get numbers from Comcast so that we really have 3 different provider numbers, and then see, put it on the agenda.
I guess I would like to see numbers from Comcast,
Okay.
because they are an alternative, whereas AT&T is not an alternative for the cable. Right? So the only 2 would be WOW and Comcast.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I'd rather make a decision in 2 rather than just 1.
That might take us out to 2018.
But, I mean, the fact that they're not responsible, all you do is that.
Well, they already have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing already. You wanna ask again?
Would,
There's not trying any harder than I was here.
That's right.
yeah, so I mean,
They're
really,
consistent.
where it became apparent to make sense to bundle the cable and the internet was to get that pricing. I mean, there's the pricing that AT&T offered versus what WOW is offering is, you saw the difference. I see the value in trying to get Comcast. I can try to engage them again, and report back to you guys and see what happens. I mean,
When did you first go to them?
when did I first start this?
With
Comcast.
With Comcast? Yeah, I think I don't want to misspeak, but I think I started like in January, early January, to reach out to all 3 of them. And I've met with WOW to get to this point like 20 times, and with AT&T at least 6 times. I have yet to get somebody from Comcast to either come to us or on the phone when it's not something like, hey, I need this.
Well, if you just go to the wrong location when they didn't tell you they were going.
Yeah.
Well, I would say if we could reach out to them once more, try, but continue moving the project forward, if, you know.
Yeah, when do you need to have a decision?
The construction window is 8 to 12 weeks, so 60 to 120 days. So if we want to be live by July 1st for the activity center, we'd have to decide early next month.
2 more attempts, and then you're done.
Okay. So then, do you guys want me to, how do you want me to communicate with you that I've reached out to them again? Do you want me to include you guys? What do you want?
Put in the next packet.
Okay, okay,
Put in the next packet.
okay.
The other issue was the design, and we talked about this at the Parks and Rec meeting, and I think the new design is a much better one to keep the stuff separate, and, really provide a second backup.
Oh, the 4 versions.
Oh, yeah, the 4-lane highway.
Yeah, hopefully that helps.
Something from the public, yeah.
You covered a lot here.
I know, I just wanted to give you guys as much
That was the
information
piece
as I
I
could.
wanted to-
So I think the marching orders are, go ahead and present or prepare for the next meeting.
Yes.
But in the meantime, if you get information from Infinity, whatever.
Go with your proposed design.
Okay.
Because we talk about the lowest responsible bidder, we're not really under a specific obligation to get 3 bids open.
This is totally different.
I guess one of the reasons I'm being cautious on this is because, I mean, this is gonna be a core service.
Right, oh yeah.
For, for the public.
Yeah.
And, we have a little bit more time to try to investigate, and I think it's worth it, but it seems like it's gonna settle in a while, but.
I've never heard anybody say, I love coffee.
Yeah.
The thing is, if it's been this difficult, just to get them to give us a bid.
But
I
we'll
don't-
take
Right, I don't disagree.
2 more attempts.
How
All right.
responsible
That's
they be
good.
if we have problems. And I think WOW has demonstrated they want to work with us.
Omar, does March 10th give us enough time to get this done, or is it pushing it?
I can check with the WOW
I mean,
representative.
if we answer you by March 10th, can they perform or open us up in August?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's-
they said that was a pretty conservative time frame. I mean, let's not, pull out too long, but yeah. Yeah, and just for my piece is that, this is really to be looked at as an amenity, as a value to who's gonna use, the users of the activity center. You have everything now that's connected to Wi-Fi, not to mention, wearables and people doing their fitness tracking and all that kind of stuff. So it can really open up the window for us to do some really creative things, but, that's just my 2 cents on it.
Okay,
Cool,
thank you.
all right, no problem. Yep,
All right.
All right.
Anything else?
no, done.
Glad you're not sitting there staring.
I took a page out of this book with all the handouts.
And the too.
Okay.
Oh, here we go, it's the best part.
What,
Golf carts,
It's only
grass
golf
seed, and
carts.
fertilizer.
Okay. Golf carts, we're still
Road.
building the grass seed.
You
I
can
got it.
tell that it's springtime there. Yes, I'd like to inform the board, golf services went out to bid for our annual 15 golf cart purchase. The lowest bidder was Easy Go in the amount of $42,900. Once we received that bid, then we asked them for leasing options. Sue helped us with that, and it showed that since we keep our golf carts for 8 years, it starts to cost us more money than a lease in year 5. So clearly the best option is to go ahead and purchase. We did explore the electric side of carts, but those batteries only have a 5-year life, and when you add that battery replacement cost in there, it again makes it still the wise choice to purchase gas power for right now. So we're going to be bringing that to the board next meeting.
All right, we ready? Here it comes.
Oh, yeah.
Grass seed.
It was so exciting, I did not even supply a weekly packet memo. But yes, as we do every year, we go out for bid for our grass seed, both our bluegrass blends and our rye blends. And we did receive the low bidders for both types of seed were once again National Seed and Martinson Turf Products. And we will ask for approval for that in the amount of $44,896.
Any questions?
Is that more or less than last time?
It's about the same, actually. It's about the same.
No one?
Yes, I mean, to Sue's point, some of our supply line items have stayed pretty constant. I think fuel may have a lot to do with it.
Talking about pricing,
Thinking
let's
about that,
say,
the CPI might not go up anyways.
let's,
if it's the
Energy's so
.5
bad.
energy, yeah.
we'll segue into fertilizer purchase, which we did have an increase in.
Yeah,
Recent
fertilizer prices, we did have a little bump in that, but still these prices are fairly constant. We did deviate a little here. We are going to purchase some bag items for golf through a second company, Tyler Enterprises, but for the bulk delivery, it was once again Conserve, and we will be bringing that to the board as well. We do have a budget of $117,000 for that, but I believe that the total purchases are going to be around $84,000 for this.
So this is 125 tons of fertilizer?
You got it.
So then how deep in fertilizer are we?
Well, you know, when you figure that we have over 1,200 acres of turf grass that we maintain, it takes a lot. It takes a lot.
Okay. Number 7, surplus.
Surplus, and then of course we have to surplus the golf carts that we just are going to purchase. We also have some other items. The water sampler that was once installed at Sportsman's Park is another example that will finally be coming out, and just some other general items. And the carts will be traded in. The other items will go on gov.com or govdeals.com.
Okay, next on our agenda is item number 8, which is the Springbrook Well, and has been requested that that be coupled with item number 15, the Springbrook Golf Course practice area, number 1 pool improvements. Eric, it's all yours.
Yeah,
Actually,
I will
development-
first start on the
Good
deep
job.
well. As I mentioned in the Park and Rec Committee, it's time for the deep well to be refurbished. It's normally done every 15 years, similar to what we just did at the beach a year and a half ago. The same company that did the beach, the original installation was Lane Christensen. That is the same company that did this well. They are the sole vendor for the specific motor that is in the current deep well. Based on that, we're recommending that they be sole sourced. We consulted with Dirk, and he did let us know that most recently the village of North Aurora did the very same thing. This particular pump motor has a mercury seal, which can no longer be used if it's if it's voided, meaning if it has to be rebuilt. And based on that, it's highly recommended that the original company that did the installation does it. So with that, we will recommend that be done. That will come to the board in the amount of, got a lot of numbers out here, $107,714.
Kevin, you said this was a sole source product.
The motor is.
The motor is. At what point might it make sense for us to look at exchanging that out to something that would be, more readily available for
When the seal breaks. When the seal breaks, because the actual armature portion of the motor can be refurbished, and that's what's done with the housing and the major seals, they all stay in place. We did the same thing at the beach well. We'll do the same thing at Naperville when that has to be done.
He knows a lot.
And then also, we want to touch on the Springbrook Golf Course practice area and hole 1 improvements. Earlier this week, we had a bid opening. As you may recall, in August of 2015, we had an opening on this project, and it came in at $635,000 as the low apparent bidder, and the budget for the project was $380,000. So as identified in a weekly packet, the intent was staff to go back with the golf course designer, rework the scope, cut as much as we can out of the project, and bring the project within budget. With the bid opening that we had earlier in the week, the budget's still set at $380,000. The low apparent bidder is at $407,000. So it is over budget, but it's still within striking distance. With that being said, I'm just going to hand it back over to Kevin. He has some ideas how to make that up. I think with the small margin that it is over budget, I think there's some ideas that we can cover that additional cost versus rejecting bids and cutting more out of the project. We're at the point where you're going to have to cut a major portion out of the project to get it down even further. So they did, think about it, they cut from $635K to $407,000, they cut a lot.
Yes, and then just to add into what Eric said, the other two bidders were not that far off of that number either. I believe one was at $440, the other one at $460 or something.
Yeah, one was $461, and the next one after that was $479.
Yeah, so in the bigger picture, they really weren't that far apart. But to Eric's point, obviously, we've discussed with the board the last couple of years the enormous amount of juggling we've had to do with golf based on needs being deferred for so many years, and budget buckets that were put in place may needed to be refined a little better. But to make the short of it, based on a couple other projects, such as the well that's coming in under, golf carts came in a little under, we can defer to other projects that were allocated to replace trees that were cut down. It won't make a lot of difference if we plant a tree in October or if we plant it next May. So with all that, we can make this balance. And we do have some painting monies that we may be able to use other capital allowance funds for to get that work done out of the golf course out at Springbrook. But the bottom line is we can make it work within the overall scope of the budget.
So you're comfortable with?
Because we're not adding any new budget dollars, it's reallocating just between projects, so.
So that's a good story.
So this will come back to us
Yes,
Yes, that'll come back. It's a pretty, we're very happy with this, obviously, because we're in the right time of year. Very important that this area gets seeded in September so that it can take hold in the fall, get overseeded again in the early spring, and hopefully we'll have our customers hitting off of the turf by May of 2017.
So when would this work start and?
Late August.
Late August.
Yeah.
But to
Early
keep everything
August.
moving along, we're proposing bringing a contract to you next month, park board meeting for approval of contract, and then the work will happen in August when it fits better with the operating.
Thank you.
Okay, then we move on to item 9, administration building renovation.
Yes, last summer, fall, staff sat down and developed a scope and a budget for renovations to the administration building renovation project. A total of $335,000 is allocated for improvements to the elevator. The elevator that really is actually too small to comply with ADA accessibility. To repair the skylights, do improvements to the community relations work pool area when Brad's folks move from admin to the new Fort Hill Activity Center. Also, some minor renovations in the lower level for the planning department to shift downstairs. So we were hoping to do that work this summer, fall, but more recently, staff, we had discussions logistically about another approach. And the thought is, instead of doing all the work this summer, fall, is maybe do the community relations work area in the front desk. When Brad's folks move out, his remaining staff that are going to stay behind, they would actually then can move upstairs to the admin building. The lower level admin building with all those open cubicles on there would be a great spot for some of Kevin's folks who are going to be displaced from the Naperville Park Central Maintenance Facility project that come over there. So what we're asking the board and as a suggestion for consideration and next steps is we would just take a small portion of the work to this year, and of that $335,000, we may only need about $50,000. So the next couple of months, we could bring contracts to the board for indoor furniture and equipment that's needed for the community relations area and minor renovations, but the remaining balance, that $335,000, will be reallocated in 2017 to do the majority of the renovation. So we just want to propose that idea. We think it makes a lot of sense from a staff perspective. Hindsight is always 20/20, but it's one of those things we see a lot of opportunities. We want to let you know because when we start bringing contracts to you in the next couple of months for the smaller portions of the admin work, we're going to start telling the story that the rest of it we're going to do.
Makes sense.
Okay, Naperville Park Central Maintenance Facility Development.
Okay, I got a handful of just minor updates regarding this project. The bid for the project is set to go out next Wednesday. One housekeeping item, back in January 22nd, 2015, the Park Board approved the CM services contract with Land Incorporated. We identified in the Park Board memo that there was what they call a guaranteed maximum price, just like we had for Nike and the Naperville Nature Center and the Activity Center. And so what we identified is once we had a better understanding after design phase, before we go out to bid, we would lock in that GMP. And I had discussions with Dirk as well as with Ian Lamp with Lamp Incorporated. Ian's going to provide us with a letter. And then at the March 10th Park Board meeting, we'll process that as a change order, but basically locking in that greatest maximum price at $7,800,000. And that was the amount we originally identified as the budget for the building. Working with Kevin and his staff, just like any new design development, 2 weeks ago we were about $600,000 over budget. And we brought the project down through value engineering down to about $150 over budget. The CM and the architect feel comfortable with the contingency of $200,000 in the building with alternates. And even if we have a package that's really out of line that because there's going to be like 22 bid packages, if there's a package out of line, we can always rebid it to keep the project schedule moving. So we feel like we're in a really good place, just like we were with the Fort Hill Activity Center before we went out to bid, but we want to let you know that tidbit. Also working with Omar and the city of Naperville, as we did with the Fort Hill Activity Center, we have an interest in extending and working with the city, but extending fiber optic cable to the new Naperville Park Central Maintenance Facility. So shortly, we'll first have discussion with the Park and Rec Committee, but then the Park Board, but an IGA with the City of Naperville to provide those services. And then as mentioned earlier, there's underground storage tanks, fuel tanks at the Naperville Park Central Maintenance Facility. There is a process when those tanks are removed. We're going to have to call in the state fire marshal to see if there was an earlier release years ago underground, which we will not know until we pull those tanks, and that could affect schedule and budget. And we did some borings, and everything seems to be pretty well in a good condition where we don't have any concerns, but again, you still don't know until you pull those tanks. But in order to be in a good position and be prepared, the thought is to bring on CB&I to provide, that's the environmental consultant who helped us with the Sportsman's Park remediation project, but to bring on CB&I to provide the environmental services, write the environmental specifications for the project, and get them going. And then shortly thereafter, would also contract with CB&I. We solicited 3 quotes for the Fort Hill Activity Center on what they call the SWIP. It's the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. And we need to provide that service as required by the Illinois EPA. And when we solicited quotes for the Fort Hill Activity Center, CB&I provided the lowest number. And it's based on unit pricing, but it's a number of visits that come out every week to do an inspection of the silt fence and all the other measures that are in place to prevent sediment from moving into drains and making its way down to the DuPage River. If we add up those 2 proposals, one is for $16,500. The SWIP proposal is for $18,300. To get things moving with the environmental services, it's recommended since Center 20 to work with Ray and have that approved. But shortly thereafter, when the SWIP proposal is ready, to present that to the boards and chambers like we've done before, like with the Riverwalk Cafe, with the engineering and architectural services, that we bring it to the board. So then once it goes over 20, the board has a chance to weigh in and then to approve. So just an update there. And that's it for Knock Park.
Okay, now we have 3 playground renovations, Huntington Estates, Old Sawmill, and Walnut Ridge.
Yes, so my intent, just for the sake of time, is to consolidate those 3 sites. As identified in the February 19th weekly packet memos, a total of $530,000 is budgeted for those playground renovation projects. As identified at the February 19th Parks and Rec Committee meeting, residents for Huntington Estates Park Playground came to us and said, can you add a shelter? And we said, well, we do not own the property that Huntington Estates on in School District 203 and part of the Ann Reed Early Childhood Center. But at the same time, we reviewed our lease agreement with the school district and identified any improvements like the play equipment or shelter with all of us. So we presented to the Parks and Rec Committee, and the thought is that additional shelter would be $20,000 and include it as an alternate and see where it comes in, because that was just an estimate at the time. We had bid openings and all 3 projects were reviewed. So I want to report on the numbers that we received. So for Huntington Estates, we budgeted $95,000, and with the shelter, the total price came at $108,740. For Old Sawmill Park, our budget was $220,000, and the bid came in at $148,000, low bid. And then Walnut Ridge Park, the bid was $215,000, and the bid came in at $185,000. And just a note real quick on Old Sawmill Park and Walnut Ridge Park, which you'll see in the memos, I had discussions with Dirk earlier today, and 2 of the parent low bidders, or 2 different companies, they were non-responsive. And what that means is, as far as the references, we asked for a minimum of 5 similar type projects. In this case, 5 playground renovations, and we provided 4, both the companies on each of these. So we went with the next lowest bidder. So the numbers I gave you is with the second lowest bidder for Old Sawmill Park and Walnut Ridge Park. All 3 of these, the way it works out, the name of the company is Hacienda Landscaping. We worked with them before on other projects. They provide references of over 15 projects, including projects they've done for us. So definitely they were qualified in that area, and they seem to be the responsive and responsible bidder at this time. So if we take the total of all 3 projects, plus usually we add a 5% contingency. We also have backstops for Old Sawmill Park and Walnut Ridge Park. We plan on doing those as separate projects, and that total would be about $25,000. And so we add all that together, and what we get a number of $489,845, and that works out to $530,000 budget, over $40,000 under budget.
Question, so, Old Sawmill and Walnut Ridge, Old Sawmill came in at 72,000 under, what was budget, is that correct?
Yeah, the budget amount was $220,000, and the low responsive bidder at this point is $148,000.
Okay. And then Walnut Ridge was budgeted at $215,000, came in 30 under at $185,000. Now I know with Huntington Estates, we added, the shelter, which is approximately 28,000 was
Yes.
estimated, and then the bid came in about 23,000 over was estimated. That seems to be the anomaly of the three. That, if you took the shelter out, that, the budget versus bid was really right about on track.
Oh, we were spot on. Without the shelter, it was $80,740, and our budget for the project was $95,000. So we were under budget, but if we add in the shelter, which was another $28,000, that put us under $80,000.
Is that the 12 by 18
Yes,
shelter?
it's with concrete.
So that's the whole thing, not
It's
just
the whole
footing.
kit and caboodle, yes.
Huntington Estates Park is on Hooper,
It's on the same property, the Ann Reed Early Childhood Center, and the property's owned by School District 203. And actually, years ago, before the school district developed the Ann Reed Center, that was always owned by 203. We just leased the entire park. But when they wanted to look for a site to build a center, that's where they chose. But we worked out a lease with them because we know a lot of residents in the area still like to utilize that green space. And so we still, even though they have a playground inside, like a fenced-in area that's secure, we also now have the playground plus the basketball court that we are responsible to maintain over years, but it's on that property.
And how long is that lease for?
I'll have to check. It may be one of those 99-year type leases with the school district. And it was like that before the school district decided to build the property. And what we heard from the residents before we amended that lease, for the construction phase, they still like the playground at that site. They like that open space that's utilized. And at the same time, like Kevin's folks, they're not mowing that green space, but when it comes to the play equipment and the basketball court hoops and things like that, we chip in and pay for those costs.
But the length of our lease is longer than the life expectancy of the shelter.
Absolutely. Yeah, the life expectancy is about 15 years.
So the 489 includes the shelter.
Yeah, that's all.
And so, is there any issues with combining three like projects, even though they have their own budgets?
Well, and just in the past, we have actually lumped up some of the projects. These are all, even though we present them as one group, these are all three separate projects, and they're gonna have all three separate contracts. And then we present it to the board as three separate park board members, three separate contracts. But the way it worked out with the competitive bid process, the contract was the same for all. So the thought is to present all three contracts to the board for consideration. So that's just an update. Let you know we had a bid opening, we're well within the budget, we have some leftover dollars, and the board agreed to move forward with the shelter.
Okay. Meadow Glen Park.
Yes, so you probably identified in your weekly packet, there was a little write-up summary about this self-storage facility that's proposed west of the Walgreens on 75th Street. It's adjacent to Meadow Glen, so the far northern edge of Meadow Glen is where that trail winds through, and in the packet there's a little map that shows it. There's a property next to it that's residential now to the west of the Walgreens, which they're proposing a self-storage facility. There would be some new landscaping, new trees, retention pond, and then this facility. The height of the facility originally was identified about 40 feet tall, and the developer since has scaled it back to about 20 feet tall. But the development is being routed through the DuPage County Building and Zoning Department and not the city of Naperville because it's unincorporated. And in order to accommodate the storage facility, DuPage County is proposing a zoning change from R2, so it's residential, to B1, which is local business. Now, on on Tuesday, February 16th, part of the city council meeting, you may already know this, but the city council voted unanimously to execute a resolution to oppose the zoning petition of the self-storage facility. And the reason for that is they already have a 75th Street corridor plan that opposes that zoning change that the county is proposing. So with that being said, we want to present this to you, and also why we want to touch base on this tonight. Residents have contacted the Naperville Park District and asked, since city council objected to this and passed this resolution, we also would like the Naperville Park District, since it has a park contiguous with this parcel, and it's gonna, in their opinion, as residents identified, will devalue Meadow Glens Park, we want the Park District to write an objection letter to DuPage County as well. And since this is something, since we don't have a plan identified, we're either in favor of or opposed to something like this. This is something that needs to be presented to the park board to weigh in on, gather your thoughts, and the next step is we can respond back to the residents based on the park board direction.
Aaron, could we ask for some insight from you on the wisdom of doing something or not doing something in a position like this?
Yeah, you know, Dirk gave me a little bit of background on this earlier, and kind of thought is that they're asking us to weigh in on something that's not really the park district's job
Right.
to weigh in on it. Something that obviously you guys can discuss, but that's kind of our take on it.
We discussed it at Parks and Rec, and we thought it was absolutely not our place, and it would start us down the proverbial slippery slope, because we'd be asked on other projects that we wouldn't have a voice in. So we decided that our opinion was to stay.
And if they build, whatever they build there, it really isn't going to impact.
What does the city have planned that's conflicting with this?
Oh, so the city has what they call a 75th Street corridor study. And they're looking at
What is it?
a 75th Street corridor study.
Corridor.
For the highway. And they're looking at traffic congestion and noise and access off of 75th Street, so safety with drivers. And the stuff that Parks and Rec doesn't have to worry about.
Right.
Because you got the city handling it, you have another government layer handling this. And in their study, they identified, obviously Walgreens went through, but they identified this property further to the west, since it's not near the intersection, should remain residential. And so when this petitioner goes to DuPage County, because the property is not in the city of Naperville, and they ask for a zoning change to be business, is gonna drive more traffic to the area. So with that being said, that conflicts with the city's corridor study and their plan that they have. And that corridor study previously has been approved by the city council as a whole. So it was easy for city staff to say, okay, we reviewed the corridor study, this conflicts with the study, this zoning change is going from residential, a lesser impact to a greater impact of traffic and congestion and everything else, and here's your letter saying we object to it. It was easy. But to further make the point, on Tuesday, February 16th, all the council members weighed in, and they approved the resolution to further object to this development. And then that went over to DuPage County Building and Zoning for them to take into consideration.
This is unincorporated, so the city doesn't really
Right.
have say, but the only thing by making the resolution, it forces the DuPage County Board to
Have a greater
Have to
number of
pass.
votes when they pass this
Right.
development, if they wanted to pass it.
Right.
And just for point of clarification, I was approached on this topic a few weeks back at a Naperville Homeowners Confederation meeting. Somebody pointed out to one of the petitioners that was on the park board, came up to me and started to explain the situation and was asking the park district to step in. I immediately asked him if he had spoken to anybody on the council. I said, because this, at that time I didn't know it was unincorporated. I said, this would be a city council issue, not necessarily the park district, because my immediate reaction is, I didn't see how it would necessarily impact our mission. So I asked him if he had spoken to anybody in the council. He said at that point, no. So I introduced him to a couple of council members that happened to be there, and I just backed out of the conversation, so.
And my gut is that we don't get involved either, and I can distinguish this from the condos that were proposed where the veterinarian was across from Central.
Yes.
That was
Oh, right,
using using
Access.
Rotary Hill for entrance and
Right.
exit,
right,
where this one is not impacting a drive or a
Right.
driveway or.
be coming off the 7th.
Right.
The residents, just said that, it wasn't our original intent to have a tall building next to the trail. That was his reason for coming to us supposedly to
Yeah, and they think it's an eyesore, it's gonna devalue the park.
Well, they've
So-
already
We're not gonna
reduced
solve
the
that.
height of
Yes,
this.
yes, it's public open space.
Yeah.
They've already reduced the height of this.
Isn't this right where we have?
Yes, so originally it
really
was
wanna
up
have
around
it there, but I don't.
38 to 40 feet,
Yeah.
and at the I think it was at the city council meeting, they identified they're gonna bring it down to 20.
Isn't this right where we have the 200-foot cell towers, all of them in town are right there?
Yeah, it's one of them,
Just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah.
So those are
Those are
eyesores,
beautiful.
those are okay.
I don't know, okay, yeah,
Well,
I don't
It's great
I
understand.
think the consensus is, well, there may be some aesthetic
I don't
issue
like
here. I think that's far enough out of our mission.
I think we should send a message that we trust the city council to handle this stuff.
Right.
Okay, so what I can do is draft a letter and then share it with Ray and Dirk, and then it'll be sent to you, Mike, for review and consideration.
Sure.
It looks good, so.
And again, it's going to be one of those letters, probably, the less we say, the better.
Yes, a one page.
Thanks, but no.
2 sentences.
Okay.
Okay, Baileywood Park shoreline restoration.
And just real quick, part of the 2016 capital budget, this project is allocated with the amount of $100,000. We plan on presenting this to the park board for contract consideration in either March or April. Just want to let you know it's coming your way for approval. And then the Frontier Sports Complex improvements, this was a weekly packet sent on February 19th. But had all the lists of the improvements. A total of $1,450,000 is budgeted for this project in 2016. We're hoping to bid this thing relatively soon. We'll bring a contractor to the board for approval in the month of March. So just a couple of things.
Okay, Frontier Sports Complex improvements.
Yeah, that was Frontier.
That was it.
Reading up to us. All right.
All right, there is no executive session. Oh,
I just wanted to ask you, you want to give us an update about Fort Hill, our progress?
Oh yeah, it's going extremely well. When we had our last project team meeting at the site, the upper level track, the steel beams and railing and supports have been installed. That track is very extensively reinforced. It's like a highway, and it looks great. As you know, they're doing all the inside work. The focus now is more on the HVAC systems and mechanical systems. The gym floor concrete, most all that concrete's been poured. The upper level, most of that concrete has been poured. So it's really coming together. It's exciting to see.
Incredibly level, right?
Yes. So what Commissioner Heidi's referring to is there's different standards for flatnesses of gym floors, which I was unaware of until this project. And there's a standard up to our goal, because the wood floor installer wants to make sure it's flat, because if anything goes wrong, they don't want to be blamed for that. So then they go back to the concrete base, the concrete flooring. There's a level of I think it's 50, and I don't know to what units. And ours, they have like these lasers when they're installing concrete, so all the material comes in and they back drag it, and these lasers make sure it's like spot on. Like if it needs to be at this elevation, it's at that elevation. And they said the level that they got ours at was at 90, which was exceeded 50 by so much more. So the wood floor concrete, or the wood floor gymnasium court installer should be extremely pleased and have a very flat floor when it's a new wood floor.
What's the highest number of?
I have no idea.
But you say something, we're 90 on this.
Yeah, like a LEED certification,
Yeah.
LEED platinum, yeah.
The architects and project team were pretty excited about it, so.
So whoever's putting the wood floor on is excited.
Yeah, they should be.
Okay.
And then the really interesting part of all this is they have to bring the wood in, and it has to, with the humidity and everything, has to be accustomed to that environment before they even lay it down, because there's going to be some expansions, some shrinkage to that. So, but it's going extremely well. The contractors, it's amazing to see the contractors. There are over 40 separate contract big packages. We have contractors from all kinds of companies, and they're working together.
And they're actually, when you see them, they're more excited about the project. They like see the gymnasium, see the track than we are. You know, it's like, it's just mind blowing. They're so, like, the pride and the quality of workmanship. You know, it's like they're taking ownership as their project as they should, and it's coming out very well.
That's
And
good.
so,
Good.
so you'll see this when we tour it in May, but as offered up before with Ray, if you ever have an interest in touring the facility, just contact Ray. We're out there every 2 weeks, and then, you know, it's usually like every other day when things come up. But, you know, contact us and we can give you an individual tour, but a group tour we'll definitely do in May.
You were saying the HVAC was going in, but as that goes in, do you,
Yeah, we have a
Check it
staff
out.
member that accompanies the commissioning agent.
okay.
So-
CM's involved.
Yeah.
So what's really exciting is, like we did with this building, this was the first LEED silver building in the whole city of Naperville. We were pioneers in that. And then, you know, with all the other buildings and Naperville Data Center was LEED platinum. The activity center is built to LEED silver level, but we're not paying extra money for that certification.
Right.
Part of that process, we hire what they call building commissioning agent. And that agent works for Kevin's folks, and they go out there, they're already checking boxes, they come in, making sure it's the right unit, and that it's installed properly. They're even checking little gaps in caulk, like this big, and they're taking pictures. And so it's a higher level of quality control. And as you may be aware with the DuPage County Courthouse, there's concerns of what they call the sick building syndrome. What happens, moisture gets in the HVAC system, and then bacteria grows, and the system turns on, everyone breathes it. So what we're getting is all that testing and balancing out of the way, making sure we get what we pay for, so when it runs as operational, it runs the way it should.
Yeah, I think the commissioning is certainly a good way for us that we found to, you know, to take that path. And it's really worked in the past, so I would expect it to work here, especially in this building. Very worthwhile. Money well spent there.
Anything else, Marie?
No, I'm ready. I'm ready to go home.
Okay. Sorry. Move to adjourn the February 25, 2016 regular meeting.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks all.
This 4 million cookies over there.
She wasn't sharing, I guess.